Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. I am super excited about today's episode for a lot of different reasons. But if you've ever, okay, this is gonna feel like far-reaching. It is. But if you've ever felt the polarity between you as a creator of business, a creator of life, a creator of vision, and reality, like the thing you're looking at is not what you see in your mind's eye. Stick around. If you've struggled with this in a more literal sense of like you've got this IRL version of yourself and then this URL version of yourself. So maybe your digital persona or your online business or this metaverse and this avatar that you've created don't really feel like they match up with your real world persona or life. Listen up. And lastly, if you feel like you need to be original and unique in a world that is incredibly regurgitative and repetitive, I got you. We're going to tackle all of these today. And it was inspired by this phrase I heard, and I'll often look for my creativity and my inspiration in these like phrases that really jump out at me, especially when I'm not paying attention. I describe this magical brain hole of mine as like trying to watch all of the TV channels at the same time. And in as much as I've completely and totally given up on that, what I've learned and discovered is that every now and again, something like grabs my attention. And there's a reason for that. And I jot it down. That's kind of where all of these start, or these things that were screaming at me in the ether. And I heard a creator say IRL versus URL. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I wasn't listening. And I don't remember who it was. And it doesn't matter because they didn't coin the term. It's not like I need to credit them in general. But I thought I'm going to do a deep dive into that and just see where it leads me. Thanks, ChatGPT, because it is not what I expected. And yet it is everything I am working on continually across not just all of my own creative projects, but with all of my clients across all of my businesses and their businesses, because there is so much tension between what we perceive as being these two disparate worlds, this space where we get to be creators and ideate and iterate and innovate. I used all of those eights in the last episode. So if you're listening to these back to back, welcome. I repeat myself. And also, you'll have heard me say, if you've been listening for that long, business is personal when you are a business owner. It is a true reflection of ourselves and our desires and our dreams, but also our insecurities and our failures. It's this place where we can actually build something the way we want to build it. And that is the hardest thing you're ever going to fucking do. And business gets to be whatever it is you take seriously. So I've hoped that in these discussions, I've made it clear that it's not necessarily about monetizing your passions or commodifying your art. It's about investing in what you value, and you get to do that however the hell you want. Again, these are incredibly challenging and I would say even adversive ways of kind of approaching this concept of business, which is kind of my whole raison d'etre. It's why I call my thing the anti-business school. It's like you get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. That's my definition of freedom, right? And that should inculcate all of your work. And yet we all hate work. I remember my dad telling me when I was like 6 years old, thanks, Paps. Like if it were meant to be fun, that's what they would call it. But the point being, there's this distinct tension between the URL and the IRL. And I was like, whoa, I've never even heard that phrase before. Tell me more. There used to be a clear boundary between what was real and what was digital. But now that line is gone. Some of us, our entire professional and business life exists in a URL. Others of us, it is entirely IRL. For those of us who were born analog and graduated digital, we've watched this entire evolution happen. I turned in handwritten assignments up until college. There was a computer lab. A lot of kids had computers, but not everybody. And because that accessibility wasn't universal, people still knew how to write cursive, my friend. Like I was born in a previous century. There was so much judgment around people who not only were thriving online, but potentially living very different lives online. But the thing is like, I think now we use words like avatar design and metaverse when we're talking about our work persona. So your online brand is as real as your offline reputation. Your digital network is as powerful, if not more, than your local community. And your ability to make money is no longer tied to a physical space or even time. The phrase IRL versus URL has been floating around in internet forums and cyber culture discussions for almost as long as they've been around. People began distinguishing between their real life and their online identities from the get. The concept gained traction in the 2000s and 2010s through digital theorists and artists and meme culture. Notable figures include Nathan Jurgensen, a sociologist. He argues that IRL and URL are not opposites, but extensions of each other. Venkatesh Rao, a technical writer and strategist who has written about mediated reality and how digital presence reshapes physical interactions, also talks about the tension between IRL and URL. But Tumblr and Twitter culture and really took this to a whole new level. And these meme communities and this internet slang just became like regular vernacular. And here's where I think it starts to get really interesting, because not only did it start to critique how online personas can differ from real life behavior, but we started to remix the idea of IRL online. And this is why it matters for creatives, because it can often feel like there's no such thing as a unique idea out there. And when we talk about the URL versus the IRL, I think it gets very entertaining when we think about the URL iterating upon IRL. And we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are taking what worked and what didn't work IRL and digitizing it and creating like really cool fucking art as a result. And then we get back into this whole, it's exactly what happened with digital versus analog. When people stopped recording to tape and printing records, it was the death of the music industry and no one would even know what music sounds like anymore. And now like we have more musicians and more songs getting published every day. I forget what the number is, but there are like millions of tracks getting streamed on, getting uploaded to digital streaming platforms every minute of every day. You act differently online than IRL. You should. It's a completely different world. The more time you spend online, the more your URL self bleeds into your IRL self. We defined that, right? Like real world and real life. Okay. Just making sure. Your digital persona can actually reshape your confidence, your creativity, and your success. There is an influencer, you may or may not be familiar with this character, called Lil Michaela. They're a completely fake person, and they have 2.6 million followers. They have brand deals with Prada and Calvin Klein. And air quotes, she is not real. She does not exist IRL. But URL, she is a celebrity. So if a fake digital presence can influence culture, what does that mean about real life identities? And an age-old question in the arts community is, does art drive culture or does culture drive art? So something that came up in this discussion was, in our creative endeavor, it can often feel like one project ate another. It's a degustation, if you will. And so often I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk to creatives, I talk to individuals who have had 1,000,000 ideas. Some of them have thrived, most of them have died and are rotting in a corner or in a basement somewhere. And there's a lot of guilt, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of fear because not every single one of their ideas was meant to be birthed or survived early childhood. And the reality is that every project you start will evolve into something else. It will likely be absorbed by a bigger idea, and it might even become the foundation of something you haven't even imagined yet. Are you seeing the parallel between URL and IRL? Anywho. What if this isn't a failure? What if this isn't because your idea sucked? What if it's not because it just wasn't the right time? It's just the ecosystem of creativity. Did you know that Twitter actually started a casting company? I didn't know that. Felt relevant sharing it. And I did know it was called Odeo, which we can all recognize as the worst name ever. That's about as I heard that word and I was like, we need no more not. But it turned out that Twitter tried the podcasting thing, but when Apple decided to bring podcasting into iTunes and become the biggest podcasting platform out there at that time, Odeo died. But instead of quitting, they pivoted to short text-based updates, and Twitter was born. If the Odeo team had been too attached to the original idea, too entrenched in their IRL definition of failure or business concept, Twitter wouldn't exist. So that is where I think the URL becomes really interesting. It is a phenomenal place to test our IRL theories. Why does it feel like there is nothing new? But more importantly, does that even matter? Austin Kleon said it best in Steal Like an Artist, nothing is original. Everything you love is a remix. Star Wars was inspired by Akira Kurosawa's samurai films. Hip hop was built on jazz, funk, and soul samples. Like, literally stole it. Steve Jobs stole his best ideas from Xerox. And if originality is a myth, what separates genius from generic? Curation, filtering. I just wrote the last loop on that. Your taste is your superpower. Your ability to remix is what makes you valuable. Best creators aren't inventing, they're filtering and reassembling. At me on that one. So Virgil Abloh's 3% rule. He founded Off-White. Not sure if you're familiar, but he had a philosophy. If you change something by 3%, it's yours. What do you think about that? He took classic Nike sneakers and added zip ties. He took traditional streetwear and elevated it with high fashion. He wasn't inventing, he was iterating. And now his influence is everywhere. You don't need a blank canvas. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to iterate on something great and make it better. I find so often that people, myself very much included in this, feel like they do need to reinvent the wheel. They do need to come up with something completely original. But oftentimes entrepreneurs, business owners, creatives, like ultimately we're problem solvers. We see a hole and it's not even about what's the best, most inventive way of filling it. It's just like, how would I fill that? Like I keep stumbling, fucking pothole that everybody else is stumbling on, but most people just keep on walking by. Like they'll stumble on it every morning. They might go around it. They don't fix it, right? They don't ask, how can we fill that? So here's a couple of ways to look at something that's happening around you, IRL, and test it URL, or just URL, whatever you want. But take 3 things you love and combine them into something new, aka the remix rule. And this is what's so cool about the URL is you can find anything you're looking for on the internet. This is where communities have thrived because suddenly a whole group of disparate weirdos that could not find anyone remotely like them, IRL, were able to discover thousands, if not millions of them, URL. And that just became incredibly galvanizing and powerful. And suddenly you were able to create art with these people. You could create albums, you could create visuals, you could create anything you wanted by tapping into all of these different ideas. So by picking 3 things you love, you can combine them into something new. Think hip hop, techno, sci-fi, you get Grimes. Or punk rock, business strategy, and streetwear, you get Supreme. You want to take that a little bit further, improve what already exists. Take a bestseller and make it even better. You don't have to start from scratch. You just make it 10% better. Can you improve the UI? Can you make it faster? Can you make it cooler? That's how innovation can happen. But a fun one is the kill your darlings test. And that is if you feel stuck, I love Brian strategies for this one as well, but flip it on its head. What if I destroyed it and started over? What if I let it evolve into something completely new? That's what I love about the projects that are rotting in the corner of the basement. They're actually just waiting for the next best thing. Like they're waiting for their time. In fact, like rotting became a real URL buzzword for a while. And it just kind of meant like you're taking a beat, you're hitting reset, you're rotting. It got to be whatever you wanted, really. And when you were done, something pretty cool is probably about to happen. Why did the IRL versus the URL become one of those sort of ubiquitous internet phrases? And why was this the first time that I'd heard about it? I feel like it brings together so many of these disparate concepts I'm kind of always like tossing around and kind of just like noodling on. And I think it has a lot to do with my own place in this history because I was there before it and I'm still watching it evolve. Like we are in the earliest of early days. And as someone who's gone all in on digital music production, on digital currencies, on digital intelligence, like it can also feel like I might be jumping on some bandwagons because just as soon as I feel like I've like mastered and dominated that, it is not on trend anymore and something else is taking over. And that's fine. Like I'm super here for it. But like what happens to that thing when it's no longer capturing my own attention? And it doesn't mean it wasn't real. Like it doesn't mean that real life is bigger or better or more real. It just means it's in this state of evolution. Like we're doing this iteration and improve thing. And the internet, the URL didn't kill the IRL. The internet didn't kill authenticity. It scaled it. People think being online is less real, but reality, your online identity can be just as powerful as your real world one. Your digital influence can shape real world opportunities, and you can feed the URL into IRL success. And you can typically do that like with a lot more accessibility. And I'm looking for another word that rhymes with ability, like accessibility. But like, I often think about this pyramid of like, you've got time, you've got money, and you've got energy. Energy kind of encapsulating your expertise, the willpower you have behind it, like how quickly you can move, the access you have to things. Like it's all that kind of like you magic. But like if you have less time, you're probably going to need more energy or more money. If you have a lot of money, you can probably make things happen a lot faster. With a lot less energy, so on and so forth, right? And that's what I've always found so fascinating about the URL is it eliminates the need for like higher education. You can get a PhD online right now. It eliminates the need for expertise. Like ChatGPT will pretty much do what a lot of the experts you would have had to pay were doing for you. The URL gives us access and agency in a way that we've never had before. And I find that incredibly empowering and by no means any less real. So hone in on this ability to filter. I literally just did a podcast episode about this and I didn't, I did a loop. Have you signed up for my loop? It's my like weekly musings. I'm on Substack now. So exciting. NicoleBZ.substack.com, I think. Anywho, the point being the most valuable skill moving into this truly URL and IRL future is being a great filter. The real currency is curation. Some people say attention. I think it's curation because why will something capture attention? It's been curated well. It speaks to you. You are genuinely interested in it. It's something you want to know more about. The best entrepreneurs and creators aren't starting from scratch. They're refining, improving, and recombining that which you already care about and enjoy. Your next big idea is hiding in your old ones. What works in the URL worked IRL. You don't need a new idea. You need to look at what you've already created. Every success story is an evolved version of a past failure. So it's a loop that never ends. And perhaps this is why I got so excited when I kind of stumbled on this little debate, because it just seemed to encapsulate so many things I have been reconciling in my entire adult life, especially because of the analog digital tension. You are not creating in a vacuum. You're building on everything that came before you. So here we go. Here we go, BZ. The IRL versus URL debate, it's a false binary, like all binaries. It's all real. Originality, that's the only myth because everything is a remix. I did a podcast episode, hopefully we can link it in the show notes, a long time ago, kind of on like the history of art. And, you know, back in the day, they wouldn't even call artists artists, they called them craftsmen because the only true artist was God. And anybody else was blasphemous if they suggested they created anything. This is where that whole art versus culture debate kind of came from. Each idea is just fuel for the next. There's no binary, there's no right, wrong, better, worse, before, after. It's all happening. So the question isn't how do I make something completely new? What's the difference between IRL versus URL? The real question is what's in front of me right now? What can I remix, refine, or reimagine? So I think we're in this incredible space and time for creativity, despite all of the bullshit that's occurring. And in fact, what I'm trying to figure out is what if all of that bullshit, and I don't mean to downplay the true tragedy and suffering that is happening, but in those experiences are the opportunities to create the change we all talk about. And that's going to happen both IRL and URL. And in fact, the two are going to synergize, make each other possible when we talk about like, how are we going to change this world? So we've done it before. We're going to do it again. Thank you for being here. I love you.